it's definitely something. You can feel it. In fact, it was Ra's first sort of joyful return to happiness after what was almost a postpartum depression. We could call it a post-mysticum depression after his encounter with the voice. And it was only when he began to decode and watch the moon click the lines and be able to feel it. And the first time he felt the moon activate his undefined solar plexus, he had tears in his eyes from the joy. That was the first time joy had returned to him after such a momentous encounter. So we do know that happens, but the fact of the matter is that the primary conditioning force we were born into is the Penta. It's not always. There are mothers who are born. There's a beautiful Doris Lessing short story, very sad but also very touching, very beautiful, about a woman who gives birth by herself in a shed. And what that's like, to give birth and to be in a partnership and not a Penta with your baby, because that does happen. But the Penta is the norm. And so I want to put it in the context of family, of you're starting with family. This is the fundamental family. Now, partnership is not yet Penta, right? Partnership, you have all sorts of cool, you actually have 4 auras. You have the aura of your personality crystal, which is always juxtaposed to the aura of your design crystal, and then their personality crystal and their design crystal. And it's kind of like Jung said about how anytime you're encountering somebody else, there's actually 4 things at work. It's you with their conscious and unconscious, and then them with your conscious and unconscious, and all the different relationships they're in. But with Penta, we get the transauric form. And a Penta as a transauric form, I like to think of it as a vortex, as a whirling vortex that essentially, has a come hither finger that kind of tugs on the auras of all the people in it. And there's these different Pentas, and they're kind of fighting over whose aura or whose energy is going to be in which Penta, and they're self-organizing. And they're self-organizing into groups of 5. And it starts when you have three people or more. So we can kind of see the auras tugging. We can see there might be a little tug of war. I don't think there's much tug of war. We have some little bit of out of Penta. We have some anti-Penta going on, but then we have some Penta. And it might be that the 5 of you might even, we have to see how our Penta goes. It's interesting. There's competitions in Penta. I always like clear-cut Penta distinctions. I've always wanted to make a joke when there's more than 5 people coming over. They have to pick red or blue team. We're going to do some games, but then you at least know what side you're on, because Pentas will fight over people. Who's on which team? And it's nicer when everyone just has a hat. Maybe we can hire Stephanie next year with some of our budget to do special colored Penta hats that we can identify us. I really I love these kind of social experiments. I also, Wa is such a scary thing, and I kept trying to change this room into not circle, because big group circle is not my thing. It's very Wa, and it's also where Pentas present to other Pentas, and the representatives of my Penta's better than your Penta, and all sorts of stuff happens in the circle. This circle is, we already have a naturally adversarial relationship between Pentas. There's a circle. We can just draw an invisible line underground between the different territories. So silly. But this is how Penta works. It is, and it's a mechanic that appears and kind of vanishes. Now, Wa, of course, is not a transauric form, but it's more of a programming matrix, if you can call it. Wa is sort of an effect that occurs when you're in situations like this. People get horny in Wa's. It starts to stimulate the sex drive because it's a necessary thing for the genetics. It's a leftover, you could even think of. And so many other things happen in Wa's. There are predators and prey. People get ripped off in Wa's. There's always going to be some predator out there. There's going to be, there's things that happen in a bigger group that wouldn't happen in smaller groups. And there are Pentas that are kind of struggling against the wall. One of my favorite things to do at a party is form your Penta early. It's easy if you're a smoker, but you form your Penta, and you'll find that no matter where you go throughout the party, you continue to return to those people. No matter how many people you meet, that's your core group. There's bonding that happens at the Penta level where you get kind of bonded to those people, can't get rid of them so easily. There's the Penta holding you together every time you're around, and the Penta keeps coming back together. It wants to be together. But what is Penta? It's so funny to think of Penta as only these 3 centers. Penta goes from the sacral to the G center to the throat. So it's like it has a throat. Like I always love thinking of animals where they have a throat but no ajna. They have the open connection to it, which a Penta does not have. A Penta is closed to any logical direction. But a Penta, like a mammal, can speak, has a voice, but it doesn't have any way of conceptualizing it. Also doesn't have a solar plexus, it means they're shameless. Pentas don't. Pentas lack a lot of things. They lack pride. They lack,
They don't have solar plexus?
No, pentas are. Penta is not even really a. Penta's a transorc form that's like a whirling vortex that happens the moment you have three people or more together, and there's multiple whirling vortices. And if you want to use Penta for business, all you got to ask is, take a sort of schedule, find a schedule where you can be in aura together, the 3 to 5 of you, in aura together around 70-80% of the time for your normal kind of work days. Everyone's a different thing. I don't want to be normative about it. Some people work 40 hours a week, some people work 4 hours a week, but however you want to do it, when you're coming together to work, you need to be like 80% of the decisions need to be made in aura of each other effectively, or in this sort of Penta thing. And what's funny about that is what you start to realize is that when you're actually paying somebody, like I'm a generator, I work 40 plus hours a week, so I absolutely go to the same place, go to the same shop, and so on. It's totally fine for me to kind of work there and have my office. And if I were to do a Penta business, I could actually hire interns or hire anybody just for their Penta gates. And the fact that they're working, they don't even have to really be in aura with me. They just have to be in aura. It's like an aura chain. There's this great video game called Metal Gear Solid where they have an online version where you can connect to people through nano machines, and you're playing online with other players. You can see them through walls. And I always think, if one person's in the radius of another, it's like a Wi-Fi hotspot. It keeps connecting, and they kind of spread the auric information. But of course, it's within reason. These pentas aren't huge, but they are essentially. It's a whirling vortex with a come hither finger that grabs at any of the 12 penta gates and shares it with everybody else. So you don't have to be in the role of your penta gate. You provide that for people. You empower others, or whatever the keynote is. You share with them, or however you want to look at it. But those the other thing is the penta gates are very different. The keynotes. It's really interesting when you start getting into the deeper Penta mechanics. This is just kind of an intro overview, but I would just say don't rush to understanding the 12 gates with the same values, because those values are all very different for the Penta. The Penta has a different use for those. And even the way it moves into the vortex, the G center, and like the normal way we think of them going is only up, but the Penta, they're all kind of going to the G, they're not going to the throat in the same way that we think of it. In fact, the throat is where the Penta demonstrates. And what it's doing is it's basically showing off to all the other pentas, either demonstrating its uniqueness, that whole 8-1, I'm so different, which is why we have 10. I think it's only 7 actually shades of tan that you can have, but you can choose which of the 7 to show your uniqueness. Everyone has a slightly different garden gnome, everyone has a slightly different variant of the same car. It's like this is the Penta's differentiation, and they have to demonstrate it. Or you're demonstrating discipline. Mike having his alpha channel 731, he's there to demonstrate we have discipline. So you go over to, if he's in charge of the Penta, he has to be punishing the kid for not cleaning the room publicly in front of everybody else as the Penta demonstrates, right? Or then on the other side is the Experiential, which is the one who takes 1 million photos, or at least provides that to the Penta, the incentive or the urge to take all these photos and document. And they're also the ones, it's so funny, you go back to your family and they say, Jonah, remember the time when, it's always something really embarrassing or whatever. That's that whole experiential side with the 33 and so on. So, yeah, it's basically, it's demonstration, and then it's, material survival in some ways. And if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, I'm just going to set the context. The context is the family. And what happens is you have a partnership, and as soon as, obviously, historically, we were in so many pentas, even in a partnership, you still had parents and siblings, you had all sorts of people around. But even the idea of the kind of contemporary family, the kind of nuclear family where there's a partnership, the moment that they have that baby, it's the most pressure that couple has ever felt, ever. Because before they had the baby, they're just a partnership. Once they have the baby, there's a Penta. And what is the theme for the 3 Penta is compromised tension. It's called compromised tension, not because it's tense when the Penta's around, by the way. The Penta acts as this kind of big brother who everyone has to perform for. It keeps the tension under wraps. The tension comes out. It's called compromised tension because it comes out in the compromises between the 2 people, between the 2 individuals. And so it's going to come out. So here's a great example, right? I think the example Ra uses is, one partner's at work, and the kid's having a fight with, mommy or daddy who stayed home all day. They come home, and then suddenly the Penta's formed again. See, that's the thing about 3s. They're constantly breaking the Penta and reforming the Penta, breaking and reforming the Penta. It's not like a 4 where somebody leaves to go to the store, you still have a Penta. You know, the family goes away the second somebody leaves. This is the whole single family, single parent, or not single parent, but single child, family. And so what ends up happening, and then even there are single parent, single child families, those are just partnerships. There's no Penta at all on that. That's, its own thing.
With the compromised tension, that's when your family is going to know, though, right? It's not every.
Oh, I guess
Well,
so.
it's
I
three,
guess so.
okay.
Sorry, I
just
don't.
wanted to be
I'm not going to go into all the.
I just want to make sure.
I mean, I use compromise. I'm not sure. So we should make sure again as a couple of first lines.
Compromised
here. We'll
tension is
check that later.
3 people that are 9 and out, because that was me and my kids,
right.
and so I
And if
know
they
that there's
have-
other ones. Yeah.
Right, and there's fun keynotes for all of them, and if you're 4, and if there's space, and so the general theme of 3 that I know of is tension. Is always going to be tension. Maybe it's not always.
Well, they're all
compromise.
tension, yeah, because even 5
I've
equals
always called
hierarchical
it.
tension.
Yeah.
So it's,
Okay.
it's tension in them.
Okay, exactly. It's like, where does the tension come out then? Like, the tension for 5 comes out in hierarchies.
Mm-hmm.
And 4 can be a very complacent number for a penta, but what can happen in 4 is that people can really take for granted the family, take for granted also that they can just use the resources will be replenished, someone will take care of it, in some way that the, hierarchical tension of the 5 maybe doesn't allow for. But back to this three-person tense thing, the way I understand it, and I guess it is 9 and 0 because then there's no room for anyone else, right? If all the centers are filled, which is a pretty common one, right? But, so what ends up happening in this case is the tension really comes out in the partnership. As soon as the penta goes away, there's tension. Because the thing is, I've had this happen so many times. I can be having a heated conversation with somebody, someone else comes along, server, barista, whoever it is, here's your coffee. You kind of mutter, you get quiet. Because you don't want the tension. The penta creates this sort of blanket of covering up tension. All day long, the parent and child are fighting. The other parent comes home, everything's fine. Everything seems great. Kid goes to bed, parents fight all night. The tension of all of the stuff comes out through the couplings. When you have a 3-person penta, it's very, very hard for that 3-person penta, unless there's other people around, unless there's a family therapist, unless there's an uncle, unless there's a grandma, unless there's other people to fill in the penta roles, to kind of work through all of that tension. Otherwise, it's going to come out, well, it's nicknamed compromise. Compromise means something. It's from partnership analysis. It comes out in the compromises between the 2 people, where they go, every time, you do this every time, and you always this, and it comes out in the compromises.
Can I add something to that 3-person penta thing? 'Cause I have 2 children that are 2 and 4, and so we're always together all day most of the time. So that is the most beautiful penta that I have. There's no head endogenous, so we're just it's like. And then the 2, my husband and my teenager come home from work, and it is the opposite of what you just said. It's like, just like crazy, like the kids are crazy, everything's crazy. Nobody's arguing like with each other. It's just the tension.
Yeah, well, it's not.
And then,
yeah,
and then
it's not the opposite.
they
Because
go to
I'm
sleep
saying that
and-
when
yeah.
the 3 of you are together, there's no tension whatsoever.
Right, but then we're never apart. So
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. So the
Yeah.
tension never comes out.
yeah.
Because it would only be if the 2
So
of
the 3
you.
thing is, like,
If you and one,
with
but
the
also
parents
but
and
also
the
at age
child.
2 and 4, so it's gonna be an
Yeah.
interesting thing of where,
it'll change.
it'll be interesting to see how in one-on-one relationships if the 3 of you maintain a very strong. But it also sounds like it is a 5-person penta, and a 5-person penta is going to have its own sort of self-identity, which is pretty bizarre to us. I mean, penta's the closest thing to alien or conspiracy
No.
we could even
Now,
imagine.
like, being here is like, I don't know who I am anymore.
So you know what
Oh,
else? Jen, with your 3, with the 3 of you, and only being 7 and 2, you guys are called Where's the Glue?
Yeah.
There we go. So these are really
yeah,
helpful. I
that's-
love
no,
this.
that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying is, I love it
Yeah.
because nobody.
Yeah,
it's all
where's
just
the
like,
glue?
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna
Cares.
ask, so if like a penta of say like 3 is basically at like either 7 and 2 or 8 and 1 or whatever, obviously there's less tension, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
There's going to be
That
less
was
tension.
what
It's
I
also more
pointed out,
tension too
yeah.
because the other 2 that come home
So-
are projectors.
But
So
I mean,
you have
but 3 in
3
general is always tense. I mean, I don't want to pretend that 3 is ever an easy number. I mean, the highest rate
Right,
of divorce
yeah.
is single parents. or
Yeah.
single
Do you want me to
children.
read the 3s?
Yes, please. That'd be wonderful.
Okay.
Excellent.
So when you're 9 and 0, it's compromised tension.
Mhm.
When you're 8 and 1, it's seeking a focus. 7 and 2 is Where's the Glue, and 6 and 3 is What to Do.
Yeah, that's cute. Raw has
Isn't that adorable? I love it. Yeah, so that's 3. So when you talk about 4s and 5s, I can read those ones too. But
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, so then as soon as you, I mean, because you can think about it from a genetic comparative perspective, where you don't even really need, I mean, to keep growing as a species, you actually need 2 kids per 2 people. And actually need more, because more people die that don't have kids, or I guess the way it balances out, some people have multiple kids, of course. Others will have no kids, but the way it ends up balancing out in the end is that you actually need about 2.2. You need a little more than 2 kids per childbearing couple, or however it works out. Couple of childbearing age to that, you know. So really there's this genetic comparative where when you're just a couple, when you're just a partnership, that hasn't kicked in. There's nothing in the genes going, this is viable. It doesn't know if it's viable or not. As soon as you have a kid, it knows it's viable. So now you're either going to have another or you're going to break up. That's the other. Or you're going to stay like my parents did, where they kind of break up but then stay as friends and have some weirdly tense situation when having single parenting. So, you know, I mean, there's going to be some different options here. But the 3 is always tense. Think about projectors. Please, projectors, never ever go in groups of 3s. Especially, I want people to be really conscious about quality time. We were talking about this in partnership analysis earlier. Quality time is something that's so important for people to have. And it was like, sounds like some love language thing, but like it's just, the reality of it is, if you're a projector and you want quality time with somebody, be one-on-one with them. Don't drag along somebody else. Don't let somebody else come along. I don't know if you have undefined solar plexus. You don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't know if you just have undefined G-center and you're hanging out with the wrong people. You ever notice how undefined G-center can get kind of polluted by the wrong people sometimes? Anyway, I'm a defined G, so that's my opinion, of course. I'm the very opinionated one here, but these are the right and wrong. Anyway, so I mean, long story short, you know, I think being conscious of the pentas and just setting the context of we were born into pentas, either into a 3 or a 4 or a 5. You can kind of do, or you get into these multi-penta families, and really interesting things happen where pentas fight over inheritances. Show me any fight over inheritances where there's less than 5 people involved, you know, or 6 people rather, because as soon as it becomes multiple pentas, the pentas are competing for resources. That's what they're here to do, is compete for resources. The side of the family, you know, which side of the family are you on? The one that has more pentagates, because they're going to defeat the other side of the family getting the inheritance. Oh my God, I tried to buy this house before I did this one. It's the most incredible, it's like a palace like you'd find in India. This family from India moved here, they own a bunch of Indian restaurants all over the place, millionaires. They had a nightclub for a while in Albuquerque, and then they ended up, you know, growing older, things happened, and age, and then the house became unoccupied, and there's a huge fight over the inheritance, to the point where one of them, you know, drove a truck through the, I mean, I was trying to inspect this house with the realtors, and we're on the phone with them, and one person's like, oh yes, we will sell you the house, sign the paperwork today, and then we're getting calls from somebody else going, don't sign that paperwork, they don't own that house, and you know, literally we go there to look at it, and a truck had backed through the gate. I mean, this is just down the street from me. The pentas fight over material resources.
I'm just curious if it's like, for instance, like my mom was in a penta. She has 3 other siblings and then her 2 parents. So there's 6 of them growing up. And then grandpa passed on, grandma passed on, and then afterwards, basically there's like fight between the property. So is it dependent on like the penta, like the upbringing, like the conditioning, and then even after, say, the parents
It's going to self-organize. I mean, the cool thing about Penta is that it'll try to keep you together, but it'll keep breaking. I mean, you can see how even on TV shows they try all different Penta configurations, or you know, it's almost like trying, you know, like some like Family Feud situation of which, I mean, there's a lot of reality shows based around the strongest Penta. It's all, I mean, that's the funny thing is you get so many possible Penta combinations. You can take the number of people here and divide it by 5. Those are the different. You know, you can see how many different, or not, no, I guess you have to go even more. You have to multiply, you actually would have to do some squaring or something and find that there's really a large number of potential penta combinations. And the cool thing is you can engineer a penta that has all 12 pentagates. Because the simple point is, and this would be, I guess, a key takeaway, I wasn't going to go so much into the gate analysis, but I've been kind of touching on it, is that all the penta's trying to do is have all 12 gates. Because as soon as it has all 12 gates, now there's going to be a lot of nuances there. Some lines are better for certain gates than others, and if you have third lines, it's going to typically be more resilient and all these different things. And if you have upper or lower trigram lines, depending on the penta, all of this stuff can be engineered. And there's also the exaltations and detriments that the individuals of the penta draw out from each other. And yet, despite all of this, the basic fundamentals that if you have all 12 of those gates, I mean, it's a really interesting experiment. Rent an office space, you can either get 2 other or 3 other or 4 other people other than yourself to commit to spend 70% of the time that you've all agreed you need to be working on the business and making decisions on it, or however it works, or that you find yourself doing it. If you're indirect, those are the hours of 6 p.m. to midnight, however it works out. But then, you just go in aura with each other and you just work on the different parts of it. And, there does need to be a clear separation. People do need clearly defined roles. but you all have access to all the roles. That's what's funny about it. You all kind of have access to all of those. And there are some nuances where, for instance, some pentagates will be heavily dependent on the person having some sort of skill as well, and will be more dependent on being the one that has it. For instance, it's nice to have an 8-1 who really is the spokesperson. And at the same time, everyone kind of gets some access to that because of that whole come hither finger vortex I'm talking about that pulls all of the gates together and pulls them all around. So
Before you go further, what are the 12 pentagates?
they are the gates from the sacral to the G center to the throat. So they're just that center column. Would anyone like to do them, or shall we start with it?
I got it.
Okay.
So just the numbers?
Yeah.
Okay. So the 515 from the sacral to the G, the 14-2 in the middle, the 2946. So those are all from the sacral to the G, and then from the G to the throat is the 731 alpha channel, the 1-8 in the middle, and then the 1333.
Yeah, and if you have anything in that center column missing, that's like a penta, that's like DOA. Like if you're trying to start, it's interesting, I went through Techstars, and it's basically like penta competition season. It's like 3 months a year, they have 10 pentas. They don't really take partners, they hardly ever take partnerships. They really like 3, 4, or 5 person groups. A lot of 3 and 4 person groups. And they like those even more because they can take in, they have room to take in somebody new. I mean, Ross said the most difficult thing of doing penta analysis for business is when you have a 5-person penta. Because almost always the only thing you can say is to get rid of somebody and then to replace them with somebody that fixes that dysfunction. Because almost all of us have come from dysfunctional families. It's really interesting that how the mathematics work. I love looking at the rate statistics and looking at the actual data because 1 in 3 people roughly will have a given gate. But when you take 12 gates and you have between 3 and 5 people, obviously the dysfunction goes down as you get towards 5, but there's plenty of dysfunctional 5-person pentas out there. And it's just interesting how that math works. Obviously because the 1 in 3, some people end up having the same gates and so on in the penta. And you get some sort of duplication, which is not a bad thing, by the way. It's nice to have duplication, but especially with different lines and so on. But it's not about it's just it's interesting to see how much dysfunction we all come from, and the dysfunction of families can pretty much be traced. If family didn't have gate 14, never enough money. Simple as that. Never enough money.
Yeah, can I speak to that one?
Yeah, so, let's open this up now. Thanks. So this is my intro to Penta. I'm gonna finish now. My intro to Penta. So we're opening up the round table. Thank you all for coming. Now let's have Nova. Would you like something? I got this.
So my experience with that specifically, not having the gate 14. So in my family of origin, it was I kind of had two. My mom, my brother, and I were just the three of us. We were 9-0 compromised tension, and we had. My brother has the 14, the demands, but he didn't. None of us had the 2, which is the material part. And literally our entire life, my brother knew the demands on the material needs of the family, and nobody was there to meet them. And his biggest gripe in life as an adult is that we didn't have enough money. My mom didn't buy him the new Xbox, the new whatever, all of that stuff that was so important to him. And so on not only that, but then even into adulthood, he took on this responsibility for how he was going to be responsible, financially for me and my mom, because we were incompetent in doing it. And so then he ended up cutting us off because the pressure was just too much for him. He could not he's like, I'm not, she just keeps making these bad decisions. I'm not taking care of her. And he cuts my mom off, right? Our mom off. And then he cut me. He's told my oldest daughter, he's I just can't sit around and watch the decisions she makes for her life or whatever. And I was like, that's so fascinating. And it's because he felt the demands and nobody had the material means, and he couldn't provide that. And so he had to cut us off because he couldn't handle the pressure of that. So it's such an interesting dynamic how that worked out, right? And then the other experience I had in the Penta growing up was my dad and my stepmom. They had 3 kids at the house, and when I came, I always felt like I never fit in. And I'm and then growing up, as an adult learning about being a manifestor, I'm I don't fit in anywhere. But then learning about the Penta and being right, I went there, I was hijacking my sisters. Let's do our own Penta over here. And leaving people out, and it just made so much sense how that all worked out. So yeah, it really created a lot of I'm gonna say healing through just this awareness of what happened, not taking any of it personally, oh, that's why that happened. Okay, cool, that's just mechanics, right? It wasn't everybody was out to not make me fit in, other than my older brother. But like, other than that, like it just felt like, at the time it felt very personal. And now I'm like, oh, it's so not personal. Everybody's just, feeling the mechanics. And then the not selves, like my brother, who isn't, has no interest. He's also a manifester. He's a 6'2" splenic manifester. So he's on the roof right now. And that's what happened. When he went on the roof, he like cut us all off. And I'm like, well, that makes sense. He's going up on the roof. He's like taking his space. He's, so I love the way that human design gives me this opportunity to just like have so much compassion and take less things personally.
Yeah, there's some really beautiful work that was done. It was Human Design, A Life, which Rob put together about one of the first people who he had full information from her family and life all the way to her death, and doing the kind of cosmology and doing her bardo and everything. And it's I think it was put together a few years before. I don't know, it was in the 2000s. So this kind of thing freaks me out. Wah freaks me out. I do not like sitting in a big circle. The first thing I want to do is break into little pentas and little groups. I think I wanted to put a bunch of tables here to like force, like at a jazz lounge where you like literally only have 5 seats. Like, I want to buy tables with like metal seats that are fixed to them, so then there's only 5 of them, so it forces everyone to think. No, but in all seriousness, this is really fun. If anyone wants to share about Penta, we can. I have to run over to the shop. I want to just make a couple quick announcements. Is that the band March 4th is playing at the Santa Fe Rail Yard. It's a real Santa Fe experience. Going to the rail yard to dance for free on a Friday night in the summer. It's really lovely. It starts at 7 or 8. They're from Portland, Oregon. I'm going to be at the shop before then. I'm going to talk, and then I'm going to be running over to there's a jewelry pop-up on Hickox at Boyd and Allister. This is all in the schedule, or I guess it's in the online schedule. The print one was printed a couple months ago, but right now it's. In any case, anyone wants to come with me, go to the shop, anything, otherwise hang out here. It's going to be movie night. I think Liliana Salas will be here soon for DJing. We're going to watch Ra's Encounter with the Voice, in theory, if anyone has not seen that. And on that note, if anyone has a projector, otherwise I'll set it up in the cave room, but that kind of limits capacity.
I have my projector. And I found my cord.
Oh, okay,
And
I
I have
have a
a
magic cord. So we can figure that out later. That'll be
I
something
also
for
brought a
later.
screen too. So
Nice.
yeah,
All right, anybody else on Penta? Are we all good? Is everyone? Okay. I get freaked out by the wah. I can't do it. I want to be like, break up the wah. Like, I want to literally.
I like him because it's already established.
I can't stand the wah. The wah is like, I'm just
What?
it's into a roll. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I secretly love that. I just don't like the line with it. 45. I'm 45.
I
Oh, okay.